Well, that's nice to say, but I really don't feel as if I have anything more than just some general knowledge, not expertise. I think I just have my opinion, and I think my common sense opinion. But with firearms, I do not consider myself an expert. Certainly not an expert because I was law enforcement. I think there's a big misconception with people that law enforcement officers are all experts in all things firearms. And one thing I could say unequivocally is we are not. The training to qualify to carry a firearm in a police department is not what probably not what people think it is. It's not that difficult. It's very basic. It's very pedestrian. And trust me, the average police officer on the street, if you hand him a less than simple weapon, I guarantee he'd have to sit there and spend time trying to figure out how to make it safe.
Go! Here we go! Go! That's right! That's right! That's right! That's right!
Knock it off!
Move!
Hey! Knock it off! We ain't do nothing! Shit!
I'll tell you, I got on the police department very young. I think I was 21 or 22. Wow. And I remember, and I grew up. I was the youngest of three. I have two older sisters. I was always the little guy. And I always knew nothing, and that's fine. It's just how I grew up.
Yeah.
So I was always the weaker, the lowest level of education, the less informed, and so it took a while as I got older to kind of evolve from that mindset. But that mindset still permeated me in my early 20s when I became a police officer, and it was very strange to me initially how people how I'd interact with people, and they projected this competence on me because I wore a uniform.
Right.
And I used to think to myself, like, wow. It was very startling to me that just because I wear this uniform issued by a government, that I'm somehow elevated in the eyes of most people in society as having a level of competence that I know I did not. And then also noticing people that I worked with and friends of mine that I worked with that were no more competent than me, and it's all like, as they say, smoke. Most of it is smoke and mirrors, and I think that's where I started developing my more like libertarian mindset. Yeah, I started the police department in New York right out of the military, the U.S. Coast Guard. I think I was 22, and I'm 47, so I've spent most of my adult life in law enforcement, and over the years I've seen a lot. I've learned a lot, and a lot of what I've learned is that government is just inherently corrupt, police departments included. Now, I'm not disparaging individual sure. officers, but the systemic corruption, the undue influence of politics and law enforcement is. To me is very frightening.
I understand that you were injured. I don't remember, what exactly happened, and was that directly kind of the reason that you got out? What had to do with that injury, that incident?
Yeah, sure. So yeah, I've been in since 1993, and my career I did about 20 years, and I subsequently wound up retiring because of an injury I sustained in dealing with a mental health patient, a 19-year-old kid who was psychotic. He was actually we had to pick him up and commit him to a psychiatric hospital from a home that he was living in because he attempted suicide. And quite frankly, he was a nice kid. And brought him into the psychiatric hospital, and the hospital had him in a waiting room for about 2 or 3 hours, and we had to babysit him there. And they brought in another psych patient into the room, and the other psych patient was very aggressive, and wound up attempting to assault the individual who we had brought in there, and turned into a big fight. And and in that melee, I wound up destroying my left thumb. I'm lefty; it's my shooting hand. I wound up having the thumb fused, and that led to the end of my career.
Is your thumb pretty much okay?
It's okay. It's fine. It's yeah. I mean, I do have some limitations, but it's a thumb, not my back. So yeah.
Well, I can imagine that must have been pretty tough to, I guess, to get over, and to have, you know, your career kind of stopped there because some guy was kind of crazy, and it sounds like the hospital was a little bit lax in their
yes, the hospital was definitely lax, and it's a matter of course they'll routinely have police babysit their patients before they legally intake them, and you know, when I'm sitting there for hours, it's the system, and that's just how it is. And you know, the particular incident was definitely attributable to this system, and it is what it is. It's, to me, not a big deal. It was a little bit of a shock to have to change life plans,
right.
when I didn't expect to, but quite honestly, it worked out very well. I mean, you know, luckily in New York, there's a great retirement system that in situations like this, you're pretty well taken care of. So I am absolutely not complaining.
Good. All right.
Yeah.
So let's talk a little bit about, and without focusing, you know, a whole lot on conspiracy theories or what may or may not have happened with the Florida shooting, but what are your thoughts about that, and maybe particularly concerning the behavior of the sheriff's department, the behavior of the police officers or officer that actually kind of went in and tried to help, and what are your thoughts about all of that?
Well, initial thought is, what a tragedy.
Yeah.
It's sad. It's a shame that it happened. It shouldn't happen. It does happen somewhat regularly. So changes definitely do need to be made. I think the big argument now is, like, what are those changes, and how do we as a society sort of help prevent these types of incidents from happening in the future?
Right.
It's kind of interesting to me and intellectually dishonest that the mainstream left in this society chooses to focus on the NRA as the culprit. When the FBI, the Broward County sheriffs, the individual officer who was present, they're the ones that failed.
Yeah.
They're the ones that failed those students. Not the NRA had nothing to do with it. And it's, blame isn't being laid at the feet of those who are really responsible.
Right.
And it's just very ironic that the hysterical left in this country wants to give up their right to bear arms in place of having the government protect them. And in this case, just clearly illustrates that the government can't protect us, and they won't. And nor do they have a constitutional obligation to protect us, as per I think it's Warren versus District of Columbia in June of 2005.
Mm-hmm.
The Supreme Court ruled that law enforcement do not have a constitutional duty to protect a person from harm.
So what are, in general, what are they required to do? If they see somebody getting shot, they are not required to engage, correct? So
they are not constitutionally required to protect you. So what does that mean? I mean,
Yeah.
I guess we can have a philosophical discussion about it. Yeah, so I read that decision years ago, Warren versus District of Columbia, where the Supreme Court ruled, I believe it was 5-4, that law enforcement does not have a constitutional duty to protect a person. It went a little further, and it did state that law enforcement does have a constitutional duty to protect the community. What that really means, I don't know. I'm not a legal scholar, but you can't be brought up on federal charges. If a police officer sits on his thumbs while someone's being hacked to death with a knife or shot to death with a gun, can't be brought up on federal charges. And I can't imagine an instance where they'd be brought up on state charges either. There's a term used in law enforcement called the tactical retreat, which is basically running away. So, as long as you can articulate that it was too dangerous for you to get involved, you just make a tactical retreat and monitor the situation. I don't think you'd ever be called out on doing otherwise. I've never heard of a case, I've never seen of a case where a police officer was criminally convicted for not protecting somebody. Maybe it's happened. I've just never heard of it.
Wow. So, a lot of, I hear this all the time on the videos I've taken of different riots and things, and there's, as you know, plenty of video evidence of police officers standing by watching. When I got attacked, there was just a whole group of police officers there in riot gear and gas masks and everything, and people are like, how can they legally sit there and watch? And I guess maybe some would lose their job if they did act, or maybe some departments require that, no, if you want to stay being a law enforcement officer with us, you do have to put yourself in the line of fire. And
yeah, well, that goes back to one of my original comments when this call first started about the systemic corruption of law enforcement in this country. The officers are assuming they were under orders to either take sides or to be very hands off with one group as compared to another, regardless of whether a crime is being committed in their presence. Instances like that are perfectly illustrate the corruption.
Right. Yeah. Right. And and I don't want to disparage the individuals, because trust me, most police officers are very heroic individuals. They want to do good. Yeah. They want to be the hero. Mm-hmm. So I'm not blaming them individually. It's the bureaucracies that are corrupt. Yeah. And initially, I thought that maybe it was, just Berkeley Police and that department, maybe that whole department was just kind of corrupt. But, I soon found out that kind of the same thing takes place in Portland and in Washington, and, maybe, which are both very left leaning. So
right. Yeah, the police commissioners are beholden to the mayor, and the whole political structure has a great deal of influence on how that particular city is policed.
Yeah, I mean, definitely.
Right? Isn't justice supposed to be blind? There should be no political influence whatsoever. Right. But we all know that it's not, and the fact that it's not, it's automatically corrupt.
Yeah, totally agree on that. So let's kind of switch gears for a little bit and talk about the March for Our Lives. In fact, if you have any thoughts on the initial CNN with kids, the town hall, I didn't watch that. I have not watched very much of that, so I'm not really too knowledgeable about that whole event. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that before we get to the March for Our Lives, or.
Well, like I mentioned in a text yesterday, I'm the janitor. I don't sit in class. I really purposefully limit my consumption of news. Because it's quite honestly, I get depressed about it. I get frustrated. So for my own mental health reasons, I do try to disengage as much as possible and kind of find a balance with staying somewhat informed. So in that case, to me, the janitor was the perfect way to explain how I view myself in this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
So, to me, the whole March for All Lives movement, and even Black Lives Matter, insert your leftist cause, whatever leftist cause you will. To me, it boils down to this: some people believe in liberty. Some people believe in the individual, and those people are innately suspicious of government and their and authority. Mm-hmm. And there are others who naively believe, that through indoctrination, that government is benevolent and its leaders are righteous. And that second group I find frightening. These like-minded group of leftist-leaning people, the same ones, they don't realize that their existence and the behavior that they demonstrate just further makes people want to hold on to their guns. That's why we want to hold. That's a part of the reason why we want to hold on to our guns.
Right.
And why we will, and why it will never happen, at least not in our lifetime.
Well, the Washington Post, to their credit, by the way, went and decided to dissect actually who went. First of all, very small percentage were actually young people.
90%. 90% were middle-aged.
90%.
90%.
You might think, okay, well, if you're a 15-year-old and you're going to this march, you're probably there with an adult. So you wouldn't be surprised if it was 50%, let's just say.
Yeah.
But the fact that it was 90% is surprising. And then
the fact that it was 90% and you never saw that represented on TV. You've only seen the young people.
Yeah.
Wait, how do you shoot around an audience that is 90% middle-aged?
Extreme desire.
Yes.
Extreme desire to message something in a specific way.
Yep.
And along that front, only 12% of the people who were new to protesting reported they were there to motivated the march because of the gun control issue, compared to 60% of the participants with experienced protesting. So again, 60% of people who are the protesters, right? The people that are there all the time,
who were part of the Trump Women's March.
They are at every march that goes on with these organizations. Those people knew the narrative. They knew to go to the people and say, "Hey, absolutely, we're here for gun control." The people who were just there because this in particular event inspired them to go out there and be activists, the grassroots of the grassroots movement, only 12% of them said that they were protesting to support gun control. Now, imagine that person. You've seen all the coverage.
So the number one was peace and number two was anti-Trump.
Yeah. You watch the news. You're going to this event. So you're obviously dedicated to this at some level, right? You watch the news. You know the narrative of what it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be about restricting guns to save children's lives. Not about the Second Amendment, of course. You love the Second Amendment, but it's about saving children's lives. And then an interviewer comes up to you. You're dedicated enough to be at that rally, and still only 12% of them said, yeah, gun control. So, 12% is probably high. Probably there's certain people in there who are just, I don't like Trump, and are smart enough to know, well, the answer is supposed to be gun control here. So I better say gun control.
Amazing.
That's incredible.
Incredible. And incredible that the media has not covered it at all. Thank you, Washington Post. Thank you, Washington Post. Where's the big expose on telling us who these people really are, CNN? Where is it?
Mm-hmm. So, there's a lot of talk about, I think Time.com had some kind of article, maybe a little bit of videos. I know that LA Times had that op-ed piece. And it just, it's building up steam as far as people wanting to repeal. But then as you pointed out, in text, you need What are the parameters? Off the top of my head, I don't remember that.
So to repeal an amendment to the Constitution requires 2/3 House vote, 2/3 Senate, plus 3/4 of the states have to ratify the removal of the amendment. Yeah, good luck.
All right. So then, do they even need to? Jumping a little bit. Oh, go ahead.
Yeah, I don't think, even following the mass hysteria with this last school shooting,
Mm-hmm.
I personally don't believe that there exists the political will to amend the Constitution. Not even close. However, through legislative overreach, it's not necessary to repeal it. A good example is let's use the First Amendment.
Mm-hmm.
The pervasiveness of political correctness, which is nothing more than speech control. So it's already being done with the First Amendment. Obviously, the Second Amendment already has been eroded. And let's not leave out the Fourth Amendment. Our right to be secure in our personal effects and dealing with search and seizure. We have intelligence agencies who routinely spy and collect data warrantless on U.S. citizens. Direct violation of the Constitution. So, unfortunately, the Constitution, is the DNA of the United States of America.
Yeah.
And the DNA is being altered, and we have cancer. And the further we get away from the Constitution, the more that people believe that it's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you touched on something, political correctness. I'm trying to remember when I first started hearing about that. It was a long time ago. And
I recall hearing about it and becoming aware of it, and it may just be because of my age. At the time, I was in my early 20s, but it was during the first Clinton administration. That's when political correctness became appeared on my radar.
Right, and I'm thinking. Initially, I was thinking, well, maybe in the late '80s, but and I remember thinking, okay, political correctness. All right, it's kind of like, well, this is good. People are going to be maybe not attacking one another. Maybe it will open dialogue for people. It just kind of seemed like the right thing to do, the polite thing to do, and I think that initially was probably billed as that, so that they could get people to kind of swallow that, accept that, for later when they really want to put the thumb screws to you and kind of crank that down.
Right.
Like the Second Amendment, I'm sure that the First Amendment, I'm sure that's going to stay and won't get repealed, but it does not need to be repealed. I mean, look, what's happening. There's been so many ways that free speech has been eroded. I mean, political correctness is one, and then the whole thing with like trigger warnings and aggressions and microaggressions and like all this stuff. It applies to pretty much the left, and they're using it pretty effectively to silence the right.
Well, to talk about the left's effective use of First Amendment restrictive measures. Let's harken back to the Obama administration's IRS being weaponized to silence political opponents on the right.
Right.
I mean, that's speech control.
Right.
In its most insidious form. It's using an alphabet agency, the federal government, to attack one's political foes. And to me, that is such a warning to anyone who has more than two brain cells to rub together, the dangers of a government that's too powerful and out of control, and what they can do and what people are capable of in the quest for power.
Right. Yeah, kind of. It's like the Democrats. I mean, for example, you look at the economy, what's going on with the economy, and everything that you see, it shows that things are going pretty good. I mean, how can you hate Trump when you see what's going on? And that was the argument on the left. He's going to destroy the market, destroy everything, and it's like, okay, well, look at all the economic indicators. It's proving that no, things are going great. And so then, of course, they switch and go, well, that's Obama's economy. And it's like, no, that's not. Those are not lagging or median economic indicators. So it has has to be Trump. So how can you profess to love our country and then hate the person or the administration that is turning things around and making things better again? It just does not make sense.
Yeah, well, that just proves that the quest for power trumps everything. Pardon the pun. It's all about control, power and control. And unfortunately, there's a sizable segment of our population that I think are intellectually lazy, / indoctrinated, all the above, that just they don't think for themselves. They just listen to the talking points on NBC and CNN, and that's their perspective on the world.
Hi, I'm Fox San Antonio's Jessica Headley.
And I'm Ryan Wolf.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities,
the El Paso, Las Cruces communities,
Eastern Iowa communities,
Mid-Michigan communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 Freedom comes with responsibility, and not enough. I think this country has taken our freedom for granted, and it's just this. I think a lot of people just think that we're going to be free. The government can and will do no harm, and we're a free country, and think we'll always be that way. And not only are they wrong, but they're causing us to lose our freedom. And it's
right.
It won't be until it's too late. I personally believe that this country is. Donald Trump is a bump in the road. It may slow us down a little bit, but I believe the empire is dying, and certainly not in our lifetimes. But I think it's a pessimistic point of view, but I think its best days are behind us. There's too big of a segment of the population is just is on the government dole, is relying on government, and I believe that's by design.
Yeah, I totally agree. You brought up indoctrination. It used to be, and for quite some time, that they wouldn't start indoctrinating your kids until they reached college age, and that's kind of when they started getting them. It's like, but that moves younger and younger. I've had plenty of run-ins with Yvette Filarka, the 8th grade school teacher who teaches in Berkeley, and so they've been getting it from her for years, and now, I mean, they're going so far back as, first grade, starting the indoctrination. It's like they've gotten smarter about it.
Yeah.
And I don't believe that. I think the worst is coming because a lot of those people that have been indoctrinated for years in the school systems, they are still in college, but give them, 10 more years or whatever when they're, are judges and are politicians and,
right.
Then you're really going to see a problem and if we got to do something before those guys get that much power.
Yeah, it seems like every generation just gets more and more left-leaning liberal.
Right.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's demographics, and it's a intergenerational plan. I mean, obviously it couldn't happen overnight.
Yeah.
But yeah, it starts with indoctrination at a young age, and trying to create a ruling class in this country, and to a large extent they have, and that is the anomaly of Donald Trump, is he's not of the ruling class, and the ruling class can't stand it. And ruling class, it does not just include Democrats; it's Republicans, it's left and right. That's why they hate him. He is not one of them. He's not, at least he wasn't for when he ran, beholden to them, and I think that explains the visceral hate for the man, regardless of what good he does with the economy or anything else. It's a common man who's not of the political ruling class should not sit in the Oval Office, and he's just disparaging that whole myth, turning it upside down on its head, and they're spinning. They don't know how to react to it. So they're just reacting with aggression and hate, and the political group of tolerance is once again showing that they are the most intolerant.
Right. Yeah. It's,
the people of this country spoke. We elected a leader, someone from the outside, and the insiders, they can't handle it. Well, we got news for them. They don't own this country. We do.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty shocking that we're falling from within, and I didn't really start realizing that until probably towards the end of 2016, and that's kind of when I started getting woke up, or red pilled, if you will, about what's going on, and I was shocked. It kind of started with the whole, watching some videos about some of the feminists and thinking, wow, do people really think that? Do people really believe that? And it's like it's a total attack on family, attack on on God, on anything that's like normal or
to kind of make this a little bit personal, and I'm not going to mention any names, but I have a really nice girlfriend who I've been dating for a while. She's originally from Canada, so she's definitely a bit left leaning politically, and I think mainly because she just doesn't really understand it. She doesn't have all that much time to even to study, politics and what's going on in the world. But she's probably the typical person who just gets her news from CNN and doesn't really give it much thought, and maybe she doesn't really have time. And anyway, so she's divorced. She has 2 young boys, and I've been trying to open her up, and I think it's a light bulb to an extent has gone off in her head that her boys are second-class citizens in this country. They're automatically suspect, and just comparing them to young girls in society, where the society bends over backwards for young girls, and that's a result of just it's an ultra left feminism that men are evil, that masculinity is evil, and rambunctious boys need to be drugged, and there's something wrong with them, and they do nothing but run around creating victims in their wake, and it's actually because she has boys, and she's open to listening to it, and I think it's kind of understands it. But yeah, there's a war on men. There's a war on masculinity that I think completely dovetails with the war on conservatism, which conservatism is self-reliance and independence from government, and masculinity is a absolute threat to that.
Yeah, exactly. A little while back, I was kind of preparing or thinking about doing a video on how feminists are destroying how men and women interact, and looking through a number of college websites and their consent forms, for example, and it was just completely crazy. It's like they expect you to list all these things and get the other person to sign off on it, and you've got to be able to, you have to, like in the middle of sex, you've got to stop and go, okay, is this particular thing we're doing?
You have to reaffirm.
Right. And
so absurd.
Yeah, the least problem with that is kind of kills the romance or the excitement or whatever. I mean, that's the least bit. I mean, but it's gotten to the point where how it happens a lot of times, I guess, where the woman, maybe guys regret sometimes too, but the woman wakes up the next morning and realizes what they've done, and maybe parents find out, and their little girl is no longer a virgin, and so what's the natural response is to go after the guy and villainize the guy, and like, how do you
and ruin the guy's life, and just by the mere allegation,
right,
ruins the guy's life.
Right, and so how do you?
It's just we're not viewed. When I say we're not viewed, but what I mean is, like, society doesn't view men as valuable.
Yeah, exactly. And this was being pushed. I think maybe it's died off, but for a while it's being pushed. It's like, okay, men are natural rapists, and they will rape unless they are taught not to rape. It's like, I never had to be taught not to rape, and it's like, it's absurd putting that into your kids'
minds. It's
minds.
So absurd and so insulting
and damaging.
It's damaging to self-esteem of boys.
Right.
It's insidious. And the funny thing is, though, is I'm 47. I'm not married. I never got married. And this is probably a big part of the reason why is I just want to be able to walk away. I just don't. I live in New York, and most women are very liberal, and there's no. I just haven't really seen an opportunity for a major upside. Why enter into a contract with someone where everything to lose and nothing to gain? So that's my cynical perspective on it. But
I totally.
Yeah, I just. But I was going to make a point, and I forgot what it was. Oh, this is my point. But I'm fortunate. I found a really hardworking woman who I see regularly, and we get along great. And but having been out in the dating world, for long periods between the 30s and even well into my 40s, it's amazing how many miserable single women there are, and it's like a universal thing. They ask, where have all the men gone? It cracks me up. Like, you chase them away. We're not allowed to be men anymore. They're so frustrated with it, and I find that as a funny little twist of irony.
Yeah, no.
Us men have been being conditioned to go our own way.
Yeah.
Right? I believe there's a movement called MGTOW, like men going their own way, and it's really picked up steam. And I think to an extent, I've been just a natural MGTOW without even knowing it. Just a reluctance, driven by fear, driven by observation to get involved.
Yeah, exactly. And there is someone who talks about it quite a lot. I don't know if you're familiar with Christina Hoff Sommers.
No.
She calls herself the factual feminist on YouTube, and she's probably one of the two only feminists that I can stomach or that I can agree with.
Yeah.
Because she's more like the old school, hates all the third wave, feminist garbage and things like that. But she was talking about how there's a problem of too many female teachers in school. And the problem is they don't allow boys to be boys. They don't want to deal with them being rambunctious, but boys need to be able to be rambunctious. They need to be able to, that's kind of how they learn boundaries, and they learn boundaries with their own bodies and boundaries with other boys. And
and to that, boys need fathers as much as they need mothers. And fatherhood has been marginalized. It's
villainized.
It's at best option, and at worst, it's a liability in the eyes of these psycho third wave feminists. And I don't know if this. I honestly haven't done any research. I've heard it. I've read it. I don't know how true it is. But virtually every mass school shooting was perpetrated by a fatherless boy.
Yeah, I'm sure you're probably right. Have you ever listened to like anything by Dr. Jordan Peterson?
No.
He's a professor at the University of Toronto, I believe. He kind of landed in the spotlight when he refused to address or to use all these made-up postmodern pronouns, which are about 72 of those, and he refused, and his refusal was based on speech being legislated and the government saying that, okay, here you have to speak, you have to use these pronouns or it's hate speech. And that's something that should kind of happen organically and not have the government, again, step in and force you to address someone some way. And if you don't, if you make a mistake, I mean, you can be held liable for that. And that's kind of, he had a lot of repercussions from that, but he also, now I kind of lost my train of thought, but he talks a lot about.
I think we're talking about fathers, and male role models.
Yeah, and someone asked him, it's like, well, why are these shooters men to the most degree? And he's like, well, they have no direction. They have nothing in their life no responsibilities, nothing to go after. And so given that, it's like they tend to sink to their I don't know what the term.
Like the lowest common denominator, the evil side, like idle hands are the devil's workshop.
Why are young men shooting up schools?
Because they're nihilistic and desperate.
How'd they get that way?
Well, I think life can make you that way unless you have a purpose and a destiny, let's say. I mean, there's no shortage of suffering and malevolence in life, and it's easy for people to become embittered by that. And if they don't see a way out, see a way forward, they get angry about it and turn against life itself. And they make a display of their hatred for being by massacring the innocent. That's what's happening. And they write that.
They do write that. It's accelerating.
Yes.
The reserve of guns has, I mean, we've had semi-automatic rifles for 100 years, but we haven't had this number of school shootings. So the attitudes are changing, I think it's fair to say.
Well, it's also kind of a psychological epidemic. You know, these people keep track of each other, and there's a competitive element to it. And the fact that the media insists upon publicizing the names of these shooters is not helpful, because part of what drives them is motivation for notoriety. because notoriety is better than being ignored.
So what mistakes do you think we're making as a society to produce an ever-increasing number of young men like this?
That's a good question. I think we underestimate the necessity for young people to have clear direction and a sense of purpose in their life. They need something to offset the tragedy and malevolence of life. And we need to take these sorts of philosophical and even religious issues seriously, but we don't.
Do you think we're taking them less seriously than we used to?
Yes, definitely. I think that we talked in the past, we spoke much more about responsibility and responsibility in particular, but also purpose and maturity, and we valued those things highly. We didn't confuse them with tyranny and toxic masculinity, for example.
Speaking of toxic masculinity, why is it all boys?
Well, boys are more aggressive than girls, and there's a biological component to that that's quite strong. That's why the vast majority of people in prison are male. Like on average, there's not much difference in aggression between men and women. If you picked a random woman and a random man out of the population and you had to bet on who was the most aggressive, if you bet it was the woman, you'd be right 40% of the time. But if you take the 1 in 100 most aggressive people, and those would be the people in prison, they're all men, or virtually all men. It's also why males attempt suicide less frequently, but they commit it successfully much more frequently. They're much more likely to use lethal means. And there's a very powerful biological component to that, despite what the postmodern social constructionists have to say about it. But they've got their head firmly buried in the sand, so.
Yeah, no, they're resistant to the evidence and reality. We know that. So, but given that we know that boys are the ones, if there is a school shooting, who are going to be the ones committing it overwhelmingly, shouldn't we be thinking about how to raise our boys in a way that they're less likely to do this?
Yeah, I think we should be thinking about that. I mean, the book I published here, this 12 Rules for Life, is a meditation on exactly that. I've been lecturing online about the idea that responsibility is what gives life meaning, and that meaning is the antidote to the sort of nihilism and aggression and resentment that can otherwise be produced. I mean, there's no doubt that life is difficult and that people get hurt and betrayed. That's unassailable truth. You need something to offset that, and most people find that in their destiny, in their adoption of responsibility, and their willingness to make their own lives better and the lives of their families better, and to contribute to the community and to bear the burden of being nobly.
Masculinity is a really a wonderful thing, and it's a shame that it's villainized, because masculinity is rising up to challenge, creating things, making the world better. It's and it's been so distorted as being this evil. I don't think it's an emotion, but this evil state of being.
You're saying that there is an organized, not always explicit, but still organized attempt to de-emphasize masculinity or to punish masculinity. Why?
Because it's easy to mistake masculine competence for the tyranny that hypothetically drives the patriarchy. It's part of a ideological worldview that sees the entire history of mankind as the oppression of women by men, which is a dreadful way of looking at the world, a very pathological way of looking at the world. It's not like men and women always get along any more than men and men get along, or women and women for that matter. But fundamentally, human history is a cooperative enterprise, and men and women have lifted themselves out of the mire over millennia in their cooperative endeavor. And to describe that as centuries of the oppression of women by men is an absolutely reprehensible ideological rewrite of history. And it's what's taught in the humanities and in much of the social sciences at universities, and increasingly in the public education system. It's taken as an unassailable fact.
And you're saying that this has bad consequences for the development of boys?
Well, how could you feel good about that? I mean, if you're made out to be a potential manifestation of rape culture, if you're part of toxic masculinity, if your competitive drive is regarded as part of a tyrannical impulse, if the heritage to which you belong is regarded as an oppressive patriarchy, then how in the world are you going to step forward with confidence and shoulder that what would you call it, that burden? Why would you? Why wouldn't you just step aside?
You know, I tell this to when I have these philosophical discussions with women. I tell them all the time. I'm like, you know, and I'm speaking for myself, but I also know that I'm speaking for most men. Men want nothing more. The Taj Mahal was built to impress a woman. Men want nothing more than to impress, to help, to assist women. Like, that's what makes us happy.
Exactly.
That's in our DNA.
Yeah.
And you take that away. You take that away from men, and it's like you really erode a huge portion of our identity.
Yeah.
And when that's gone, it's, you know, you can very easily become a ship without an anchor that's just floating at sea, and it can lead to all sorts of things. So, you know, the problem with liberalism in general is it does not adhere to human nature. You know, when you go too far astray from human nature, you don't take human nature into account.
Yeah.
Bad things happen. You know, I believe men and women are I know men and women are designed and built by our Creator to not just live in harmony, but to complement each other. You know, we have our strengths, our weaknesses.
Yeah.
You know, men and women are different. You're not allowed to say it anymore. I say, fuck that. I am allowed to say it, and I'm saying it. We are different.
Mm-hmm.
There are certain things that women bring to the table that men can't, and vice versa. And you know, I'm 47. I was kind of probably the first generation that was brought up with this idea that anything a man can do, a woman can do better.
Right.
And that's bullshit. And that's just it's not true.
Yeah, you know, with this whole, you know, women's movement that started back like in the 40s or it's, you know, they got what they wanted. They got into the workplace. They got all these rights and equality.
But with that comes responsibility, and they don't want the responsibility.
Right, and they're not happy. I mean, of course, there's people that doesn't apply to, but by and large, it's like women are not happy. They're not.
Nope.
You know, people squawk about, or women squawk about, well, there's only whatever 1%, you know, of women are the CEOs or the, you know, the leaders of companies, and it's not because they're not capable, but very few want to sacrifice their entire life working, you know, 80 hours a week to do what needs to be done to be as successful as they claim they want to be. I mean, you're not even factoring in.
Yeah, you can't rise to the top when you're taking 6 months off here, a year there for maternity leave. It's not going to happen. It's a cutthroat world out there, and it's just not going to happen.
Yeah.
Or it's not going to happen on a big scale. It's just not. And you know what? I think it's okay. I mean, it's fine. Like it's somehow sometimes I feel as if it's become a competition with women, that, you know, everything has to be equal and right down the 50-50 down the middle. But only when it comes to, you know, the types of jobs and positions that they value. But what about all of us? We you know, I know you're not going to be driving for another couple of weeks, but you know, you drive down the road and you look at road construction or anywhere there's just menial, boring, hard physical labor. You very rarely see women. Very rarely. Well, you know, why don't they want representation in those jobs? I've never seen a female garbage man ever. I think we're still allowed to call them garbage men because I don't think there are any women. Why aren't they fighting for representation in the garbage collection industry?
Yeah, you know, exactly. You know, it's interesting. women like to argue that there's no difference between men and women as far as biology goes, and I think part of that stems back to originally in the women's movement when it suddenly gained power, and it's like, okay, the colleges needed to get these classes, they needed to cater to women, and so they created all these programs back in the 50s.
Yeah.
And just literally just stuck women in there, and it's like, okay, you teach this class, there was no accountability, there was no guidance, and so they completely left out in the sciences or biology or anything like that, and so now you've got all these women who they're not informed about science. They think there's more than two genders, and they don't know even the very basics about that. And
no, it's feminism has nothing to do with women. It has everything to do with left-leaning politics, because if that was the case, these feminist groups, they would support conservative women, but I've never seen it happen. Look at what happened to Sarah Palin as just a great example.
Yeah,
and there are many, many, many more.
Yeah. I can't remember what there was. I think there's some Scandinavian countries. I'm not sure. There's some countries where they worked it out where their society was basically completely a level playing field. And so what feminists thought is, okay, because of that, because there's no barrier to entry whatsoever, that more women would be doctors, more women would be scientists, more women would be, this or that, like the roles that men fill. And what they found out over a long period of time is that divide between men and women got greater. Women went back or more to nursing or more to like caretaking kind of things, and men even farther more into their side, and the divide got even more. And
it's almost like laws of physics. You can defy laws of physics. Well, you could try to, but they always exist. And much like laws of physics, the nature of men and women are different, regardless of what society tries to impose. Right. We're different. The society can dictate or attempt to dictate that they're the same. They're not. And they're not going to make that so. It's just not going to happen.
Yeah, definitely.
We can see it left and right. The garbage man example. Mm-hmm. Anyone ever seen a female garbage man? I never have. 47 years old. I've never seen one. And I pay attention. I look. I've never seen one. And I live in the middle of one of the biggest metropolitan areas in the country, New York. Mm-hmm. I have never seen one female garbage man. Not to say they don't exist. I've never seen one.
Yeah.
And if they do exist, in really small numbers. So it's just this whole idea that women are held back and are victims is just I find it hysterical.
Yeah.
Working in the police department, it's such a joke. There's been such a big push to get females in the ranks and everything, and it's so funny because all the like the bad areas within the confines of a police district or a precinct, mm-hmm. Females are not allowed to ride alone.
I thought they were equal.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, it's hysterical. So
wow.
I always always kind of laughed at the guys. I'm like, even to some of my female cohorts. If I was a commander, you'd be working there midnights by yourself, just like the guy.
Yeah.
You get paid the same.
Yeah.
Well,
so we kind of took a little bit of a detour, but we did. which is fine, totally fine. So I'm curious, and I think this is intentional. For example, during the Women's March, some particular individual, I don't know who it was kind of interviewing women and asking about their signs and different things, and discovering, no shock, that many of them had no idea what they're talking about.
Yeah.
Some of them said, well, the Florida, shooting wouldn't have happened if there was a ban on assault weapons.
Well, hold on. Let me answer. This makes me laugh.
Okay.
Assault weapon. First of all, assault is a verb, not an adjective. And anything used to perpetrate criminal assault is by definition an assault weapon.
Okay.
So,
yeah.
So the hammer in my garage can be labeled. If I clock you over the head with it, it's an assault weapon. So, like, it's such a bogus media manufactured term that these idiots regurgitate. It just makes me laugh. They don't have no idea what they're talking about.
Exactly, but I think that it's planned. It's
sure it is. It's part of the indoctrination.
Right, and if you can get people to believe that there's no ban on assault weapons, and assault weapons are, speaking particularly of guns, for example.
Yeah.
So assault weapons, to my understanding, is basically would be an automatic weapon, or a weapon that had at least a selector switch where you could go automatic fire, which you can't get guns now anywhere I know of that can do that. So.
Right. So let me just interrupt you real quick.
Yeah.
That kind of makes me think of another point pertaining to bump stocks. So
I was going to bring that up. Good.
Fully automatic weapons are and have been for decades, many decades, illegal.
Yeah.
So I don't care what the government comes up with. I don't care what legislation they pass. It doesn't matter, because the human mind is creative, intelligent, and will always find a reach around. Always. And the bump stock is just a great example of creative, smart people working around the law eliminating automatic weapons. So it's still a semi-automatic weapon, but it acts very similarly to a fully automatic weapon. But it lives in the confines of the law.
So let me, before I get to my next question, let's go back to, can you explain, I mean, I know some people are not going to know what a bump stock is, or what that brings to the weapon, or how that makes the weapon better or more functional. So can you go over that?
Okay, yeah, sure. So first of all, anyone that has a strong opinion that they should be eliminated, that doesn't know exactly what they are, shame on them, because we have this thing called the internet, and if you have such a strong opinion about something, it's incumbent upon you to educate yourself to know what the hell you're talking about.
Right.
So a bump stock is the stock, which is the rear portion of the gun that goes up against your shoulder.
Right.
That kind of shrouds the trigger. It's on a semi-automatic weapon, and as the recoil is generated from the exploding gases that's forcing the projectile out of the barrel, that recoil is sliding the bump stock and literally enabling the user to depress the trigger in quick succession, faster. That's all. So it's still a semi-automatic weapon.
So it's absorbing that.
Yes.
That shock from the first.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So the firing pin mechanism, the trigger mechanism, the barrel, it's all the exact same. So there's no alteration to the actual mechanics, the internal mechanisms of the gun whatsoever. Completely legal. I mean, for now.
I was able to purchase a bump stock of my own. These are available online from multiple websites and local classifieds. This one cost me about $400, so we're going to install it on the AR-15 right now and see what it can do. So right now we're going to shoot this several times. Right now the bump stock is not in place, and we're going to see how many rounds we can get off without the help of a bump stock. So this gun is semi-automatic, so every time I pull the trigger, there's going to be a bullet leaving out the end of the chamber. So I'm going to cock back the gun. That puts a bullet into the chamber. Safety is now off, and I'm ready to fire. That was relatively quick. So this is a 40 round clip, and so every time I pull the trigger 40 times, I can lose all the ammo inside of that clip. And that was pretty fast. You can get a lot of shots off in a pretty short amount of time. So now let's install the bump stock, and as a noob, I've never shot with the bump stock before, we'll see if it's possible to shoot faster than it is with just a straight trigger. So how a bump stock works is actually incredibly simple. The gun slides around inside of the stock and uses the recoil of the gun to shoot more bullets. This piece is pretty important. I'm a right-handed shooter, so I use my right hand to pull the trigger. And so I'm gonna take this piece of plastic, slide it onto the gun, and it blocks the trigger on one side. So when I grab the gun, I rest my finger on that piece of plastic on the far side, and then using the gun, I can pull forward with this hand. My finger connects with the trigger, pulls it, and then the gun will bounce back and forth, and each time it hits my finger, it'll shoot another round. And since the gun is doing it all automatically, it can pull the trigger faster than I can pull the trigger. Hence the full auto function of the bump stop. So these are the bullets right here. We have a 5.56, and it's just a whole box of these things. These things are about 40 cents a piece. So I also got these clips. These clips hold 40 rounds. They're about $20 each, and I can take the little bullets and just pop them into the top. And then the whole clip just slides into the gun when you're ready to shoot. This is my first time shooting with the bump stock, so we're gonna see how it goes. I got the clip in place. The stock is functional. Safety is off. We're loaded, and let's see how this works. All right. Okay. that was faster than I expected.
California, and I don't know how it is in New York, but and I was told it might have got repealed, but a few years ago they, passed legislation making it where you couldn't have a magazine that had, I think in California, even more than 8 rounds or some.
Yeah, so that's actually, I'm glad you brought that up. It's pretty funny. So back in 2012, His Highness Governor Cuomo, following the Sandy Hook shooting in Connecticut, it was drafted by the New York State legislature and signed by Cuomo in the end of 2012, the SAFE Act, which is a very restrictive, comprehensive gun restriction law.
What was it called again? SAFE Act?
The SAFE Act.
Okay.
Yeah. So the funny thing is, literally overnight, our governor made a felon out of every police officer and retired police officer in the entire state. Because in that law, it restricts magazine capacity to 6 or 7. I'm not sure if it was 6 or 7, but there was nothing in the law exempting police. So every state trooper walking around on duty, every police officer walking around on duty with a 12-round magazine in their Glock, 15-round magazine in the Glock, was a felon. Was a felon.
Yeah, that's just
that's how dumb these people are, and the population wants to put all their faith in these people, and it's just that one makes me laugh.
Yeah, it's completely crazy. Again, it's just another
So
way.
So Cuomo's security detail, which consists of a number of New York State troopers, they were all felons. He was literally he was being escorted around by felons.
And is that still? I thought that California.
No, they hastily went back and fixed it. A very short time later.
Okay.
I believe it was weeks later. But yeah, no, it became a little bit of a news story. It was embarrassing, as it should be.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's our competent. That's how competent government is.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. I think. Part of what I was trying to get at before is I think if the Democrats can get these crazy things, some of these crazy things passed, it's like, they can maybe new legislation about assault weapons or whatever, and they can use it as an umbrella or a new umbrella to capture everything in there. And they're like rewriting the definition of a word so they can include whatever they want to include. Yeah. In order to accomplish their agenda.
Sure. But they're never they don't have the foresight to consider the law of unintended consequences that like always reveals itself. Example, let's just take like simple like state income tax.
Okay.
New York State is a really good example. Very high. Forget about just taxes and fees across the board, but very high state income tax. And over the years, people, and we're not mentioning names, a very good friend of mine who makes a lot of money.
Mm-hmm.
He moved. He bought a big condo, really nice big condo in Fort Lauderdale, where he lives for 183 days a year, and he still has his place in Manhattan, and he doesn't, because he's not a full-time resident of New York.
Mm-hmm.
He doesn't pay New York sales income tax, and that income tax savings he spent down in Florida on real estate.
Ah.
So who loses? New York.
Yeah.
Exactly. So they think that just by raising the tax on earners in New York, they plan on getting all that money, but they don't plan on people leaving or people developing schemes, legal schemes, to evade it. Not evade. Evade's a bad word because that kind of elicits the thought of tax evasion, but to avoid it.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I totally got it.
Okay, where are we?
That's what I'm looking for. So, it seems like, what's next after bump stocks? It's the whole thing of just slowly encroaching on what we have, and
it's death by 1,000 cuts.
Yeah,
that's the strategy, and it's working. It's taking away our freedom, not all at once. The population would never tolerate it,
right?
Never, but it's a little bit here, a little bit there. Generation after generation, and you turn around, and then maybe the average person thinks, I don't like guns, I don't need a gun, so that's fine. I'll support banning guns because I don't like them. But eventually, they're going to come around, and it's going to affect you directly, and there's going to be no recourse. It's too much is gone already.
Yeah. Yeah.
I'm looking at this list here.
I
think
too.
we touched on a lot.
I know we have. Oops. Talked about freedom of speech.
Before we spoke, I was thinking about things to say and things to talk about, and
sure.
I just recalled a night back end of September. I was with my girlfriend. She lives in a very prosperous North Shore community on Long Island. I won't mention the towns because it's not worth it. It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Anyway, so there was a scavenger hunt in the evening to benefit some local charity, whatever. Not important. What's important is so it was all in this like downtown area, and there was about 21 different adventures, and you had a typical scavenger hunt. Obtain things, and so beforehand we all the whole there's probably 200 people. These are all adults. The adults who reside in a very affluent community, smart, educated adults.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a really important point that I'm making. Really, and the whole thing was based out of the back of the local police precinct. So I remember, right? They had us all assembled, and right before they hit the start button, and so this local cop kind of gave everyone a speech. This 20-something-year-old cop gave everybody a speech. Now these are all adults, educated adults. about looking both ways before you cross the street, and just all that generic things you tell a fifth grader or a 5-year-old. I'm thinking, and everyone's like, oh yeah, everyone's shaking their head like, oh yeah, that's good. Like, oh, when it rains, make sure you if you don't want to get wet, go inside. So just all of this common sense, just mumbo jumbo, nothing from this 20-year-old kid to all these full-grown adults. And that just resonated with me, and I really haven't forgotten that, because to me that just really illustrated how sheep-like people are and have become. That they entertain that everyone nodding in agreement, how good they clapped and cheered for the guy. I'm thinking to myself, I'm the only one that didn't clap. This is ridiculous. So, yeah, anyway, just a little tidbit that kind of popped into my mind when I was doing a little mental rehearsal for this thing.
Speaking of teenagers, particularly of, for example, David Hogg, of course, which you're familiar with, and Kyle Kushov, I'm not sure how to pronounce his name, but they're like little demigods, and people on Twitter like sometimes go after me. It's like, well, how can you be going after kids? I'm not really going after kids.
Well, first of all, at 17, you're, in the eyes of the law, you're an adult. If you tried as an adult, you're an adult at 17. I believe he's 17.
Yeah, exactly. And even some of the younger ones, it's like, well, they have. I mean, obviously, they've been given a lot of power and influence. I mean, how in the world, in like a month, could they get all these people and all these cities, like in worldwide even, to go to, a march like that so quick? And of course, some people are saying, well, it's because the whole Florida shooting was planned, which I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole right now, but you got to wonder, you just got to wonder some things, like how they were able to get that going, and how
the clandestine political action committees, funded by George Soros, and the like. Yeah, no, I definitely, I find it highly suspect that they're able to develop this level of organization organically.
Yeah, it's not enough time. I mean, I've been a part of trying to get, you may know, with Pam was part of the group trying to get a march going in Washington, and we had probably 10 people that were just literally just going at it, trying to get people to show up and people to represent, and then we had some people that were helping us, and had some financial backing, and it was literally like pulling teeth trying to get something going, and we worked at it for, I don't know how, 3 months before kind of basically realizing that we need to throw in the towel, that it's not going to happen. So
well, and it makes you scratch your head and to wonder how did they facilitate all of this happening in such a short period of time?
Right.
Yeah. No, it doesn't add up, right?
Yeah, I mean that. Yeah, and so,
but remember, one thing to keep in mind: liberalism is definitely a mental disorder. It's a mental disorder because it's really easy to be one. It's really easy to view yourself in a way that is benevolent and caring, because on its surface, everything that liberalism postulates about is good. Oh, well, we don't want, we want equality. It all sounds good on paper. We want equality. We want fairness. We want, some of the buzzwords: fairness, common sense. They're all very subjective terms, and to the weak-minded, it's very tempting.
Yeah.
And it's very tempting to those with the herd mentality.
Mm-hmm.
I want to be a good person too.
Yeah. Exactly.
Right. Like, if you really think about a lot of the buzzwords, it's just surrounding gun control. It's like, I believe it was Obama who started using it, but common sense gun laws.
Yeah.
Common sense. Like, well, who's determining what's common sense? I think common sense dictates through a very, very rudimentary study of history that it's common sense that citizens in a free country should maintain their right to possess firearms and firearms that have the power equal to or greater than their foe.
Yeah.
And the foe is the police. The foe is anyone who could potentially threaten you. The police, what do the police have? If the police have it, citizenry should have it. If the military within the confines of the borders of the United States have it, we should be able to have weapons sufficient enough to repel them.
Yeah.
That's common sense.
And I think one thing that makes it so much easier to become liberal is like, literally all you have to do is just memorize, a few phrases.
Right.
Like one person, it's like say you're an explorer, you're going to a new land, you've never been to America, for example. Maybe you have kind of a rough little map, a border of the country, and so as you get closer, then you're able to kind of fill in your gaps of knowledge. But to really know any kind of topics, say gun control, you've got to get off the damn boat and start doing some exploration, kind of doing the hard work, so you can start filling in and making your map of the topic more detailed and making you more knowledgeable about what you're talking about. But and the farther you go in, the farther you dig, the more detailed everything is. But it's like that takes too much work, and so it's so much easier to stand at a distance and memorize all these phrases about whatever topic you happen to be talking about this week. This week it's gun control. Next week, who knows what it's going to be? But it's so much easier to be a liberal and to just parrot all this garbage and memorize.
Yep. And it's easier, and I could see the temptation of it. Everybody wants to be liked.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to be part of the group.
Yeah.
And everyone wants to be viewed favorably by others. And
sure,
I'm a nice person. I believe in equality. And I believe in common sense and fairness, whatever the hell that means. And so all of these buzzwords that are routinely touted by the political left, by those with the liberal mindset, they all sound good on paper. Who isn't against fairness? Who isn't against protecting the children? Who isn't, right? I mean, but it's ridiculous in its execution. It's absurd, and it's intellectually lazy, and it's definitely it's magnetism toward the dumb.
Yeah,
can't think for themselves.
Yeah, kind of along the same lines of the little illustration about exploring. For example, the hate speech law, Bill C-16, that was enacted in Canada, and it's kind of it's all bled over into the states. But you look at that stuff, and it seems reasonable unless you really dig. There was I'm trying to think of there was a test. It's to looking for your unconscious racial bias. I don't remember the name of the test, but basically, and I took the test, at least as much as I could stomach, to see if I could in some way gear it towards a good result. But basically what it is to looking for your unconscious racial bias.
Okay, so the implicit association test in principle is this word association game. It's actually predicated, I would say, on psychoanalytic ideas, most particularly on Jungian ideas, because Jung developed the association test many, many, many years ago. But it purports to investigate whether you are unconsciously biased towards one group or against another group. Could be gender, could be ethnicity, could be race, could be attractiveness, whatever. But The problem is that when you give the same person the damn IAT twice, they don't get the same results. So there's a rule for diagnostic tests. And the rule is the reliability, test-retest reliability, has to exceed something like 0.8 or 0.9, 0.8 at least. So the Big Five does that, IQ tests do that, but there's damn few tests that pass that reliability criteria, and the IAT is only reliable, I don't remember precisely, but I think it's about 0.5, which isn't even, it's not even near close enough to be used as a diagnostic test. Plus, it's not valid. So what does that mean? Well, let's say I assess your unconscious bias and give you a diagnosis. Well, there's no evidence that it predicts your behavior. So what good is it? What good is it? Well, it's good if you want people to send you to retraining exercises so that you can have your perceptions adjusted in the direction that your organization and the state thinks is proper. And that's happening everywhere. I got letters this week already for people at CBC. It's becoming mandatory there. St. Mike's Hospital, same thing. And they've decided that all of their micro institutions within the hospital will be equitable. There'll be 50% women and 50% men at every single level of the organization, or the organization is corrupt and oppressive. It's like, it's spreading so fast you can't believe it. I wrote Mazarin Banaji and Anthony Greenwald yesterday and sent it off to some of my colleagues saying, are you going to come out and make a public statement about the fact that your damn test is being used by pathological people for nefarious purposes?
Some places are, basically the conclusion is, okay, you need to go to a seminar, or you need to go to like a weekend workshop.
You need to go to a re-education camp.
Right.
Sounds like Nazi Germany to me.
Right, and that's actually happening. But I went to that website and I looked through it, and I'm like, okay, I know what's going on, but this all looks reasonable.
Yeah.
It doesn't look bad. It looks like something that you would go, oh, yeah, this makes sense. This is good. And so then, knowing what it was, I thought, okay, maybe there's some way I can cheat the system, or whatever you want to call it. But the test was so well done and so insidious. I couldn't figure out how to gear my answers so it would come up that I didn't have any racial.
Okay. Oh, I see what you're saying.
Bias.
Yeah.
And it's developed. One of the professors that developed it was an avowed Marxist professor.
Yeah.
The other guy I don't know about, but some employers are requiring, even in the U.S., are requiring people to take this.
Wow.
If you take it, you are going to be found guilty of racial bias and have consequences. And the bad thing is, it's like, okay, for a test to be valid, for some kind of scientific test like this to be valid, it's got to have a certain amount of, it's got to pass a certain threshold in order to be like a valid test. And it does not even come close. So number one, it's not a valid test.
So it's really it's a political weapon, is what it is.
Well, exactly, and they're
using
what it is. Yeah, they're using it for their own political ends, and there's no proof. It's like, okay, so that you find out that someone has unconscious racial bias. Okay, there is no proof whatsoever that it's going to lead you to being racist.
And by the way, everybody has racial bias.
Sure.
I mean, everyone. It's human nature.
Right.
We gravitate toward people that look like us, that share our culture. That's that's just the way it is, and that's how it always be. And it's taking that human nature into account. You go to I don't care where you go. You go to any. Go to any city. There's Chinatown. Mm-hmm. There's Little Italy. There's there's black communities. There's Puerto Rican communities. People like to clump together.
Right. It's
so that's a demonstration of racial bias.
Yeah. But then that's being...
what I don't see how I fail to agree with anyone that's a bad thing. It's people like to clump together.
Well, sure.
And there's no amount of legislation or re-education and some bullshit class is going to change that.
Yeah, exactly. And if I were to go to whatever, some other country where I didn't know the culture, I didn't speak the language, and I find a group of white people, living there, it's like, of course I'm going to gravitate towards them for comfort and for security. And it's not like doesn't mean I can't stand other races or anything like that. It's like,
great. Yeah, exactly. That's a good distinction. Yeah, it's not like you just feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
There's black communities and there's white communities. There's Puerto Rican communities. There's Asian communities. There's nothing wrong with that.
Right.
I see no problem with it whatsoever. That's just how it is.
But it's being turned into, the left is turning that into a problem, and to increase the racial or the divide, and to stoke the fires of some people want, or at least
it's using it to perpetuate the divide and conquer strategy.
Yeah,
that's all.
Yeah, it's the whole
that's all it is, divide and conquer.
Yeah, definitely.
And there are some people I think who are wise enough to see it, and those that are just, whether they're just flat out dumb or intellectually lazy, that believe it, and that's and they're the useful idiots.
Yeah, yeah.
The pawns. Right?
Yeah. Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah, I don't want to. I don't know how much time you have, or do you have any final thoughts or anything that you want to bring up, or anything that you think of that kind of?
Yeah, no, I think we did a pretty comprehensive job at covering a lot of diverse topics, and a lot of them, interestingly enough, kind of dovetailed with the major political talking point, the Second Amendment, and how a lot of these issues really have a direct tie into it. There's one other thing I was going to say about when we were talking about bump stocks, and there was an article in I believe it was the Times, just about a week or two ago, about making the manufacture of firearms illegal. And banning the manufacture of firearms. And I thought that was really interesting.
Really?
I thought it was interesting in the same way that bump stocks kind of became a workaround for a solution to sort of augment the fact that automatic weapons are illegal. So if they theoretically were able to pass legislation making it illegal to manufacture firearms in the United States. I mean, years ago, this has been thought of and developed and executed very successfully many years ago. You can get code on the internet that you can download into your 3D printer, and you can 3D print yourself a gun.
Yeah, I know that
technology exists.
Yeah,
it's not a big deal. So that's just another example of they can legislate whatever they want. There's always going to be a workaround, always, and who winds up getting punished but the honest person? Again, the honest person is always caught in the middle and is the one that suffers when they come up with this crazy shit. It's always the honest person, because the people that don't abide by the law aren't going to abide by the law. I mean, every one of these school shooters broke dozens of laws in the perpetration of their crimes. So when you listen to the hysterical left, you actually believe that what they did was legal in any way. And multiple laws were broken, but yet they think that magically passing more laws will prevent it, which is just so absurd.
Yeah, I mean, you can obviously banning drugs never works. Banning murder definitely doesn't.
Right,
is not gonna
right,
work.
Yeah, but the war on drugs is a great example. Right, heroin's illegal. It's a huge epidemic.
Yeah.
Here in New York and Long Island, it's huge.
Really?
Yeah, huge. And it's interesting. It's illegal. And you know that law of unintended consequences here in New York. About 10 years ago, they changed the whole prescription method. So basically, it's really, really difficult to forge prescription now. And ever since then, there's a marked correlation between the day that law was signed and the major influx of use and subsequent overdose deaths by heroin. So a lot of people who are addicted to painkillers can't get them anymore. So they go to the next thing, and that's the heroin.
And that's
so that speaks to that like law of unintended consequences, right?